What's new, crew? If you're new, my name's Cassandra. Today I thought we should talk about my long-term food storage and the kind of 7 categories of things that I like to keep stocked, what I put in each of those categories, and kind of how to just start building up a food storage. A little stuffy, looking a little rough. I have the world's worst sinus infection I've ever had, and I can't take anything for it right now. So we're just barreling through with a lot of water and hoping that eventually, between lots of water and lots of sleep, I will start to somewhat feel better. But that's why we're puffy and watering eyes and all of the things, because there's just so much pressure going on in my head right now. But I think a lot of people kind of woke up in 2020 and realized that we need to have some sort of food security in our own homes. Obviously that looks way different for every family. Even just comparing like myself to my siblings, things would be a lot different. Myself to my in-laws be a lot different. Me to you could be a lot different, just based on family size, what you like to eat, diets. All of those things will determine what ends up going in your food storage and how much you're keeping of said things. Plus, how long do you really want to have food put up wise for your food storage? You only feel the need to store up maybe an extra week's worth of food, or you have people like myself who try to go for about a year's worth of extra food, and then you have other people who try for like 25 years worth of extra food. So it really just depends on what your needs and wants kind of are. That said, we have spent a lot of time together recently downstairs in my long-term food storage, getting things organized, getting things sorted, and kind of putting things back together after a lot of just disorganization and all the other things that happen in life. That being said, I have gotten a lot of questions, and I'm hoping that this video will clear a lot of those questions. So we are just going to go category by category. I personally will start bulking up my long-term food storage before we even start getting into categories. Is I will shop sales, shop deals. I also put in a massive garden every year, and we preserve a lot of our own food. I do realize that's not an option for absolutely everybody, or just something that a lot of people just don't feel the need or the want or the desire to do, and that is a-okay. If that's not for you, that's not for you. That's just how we decide to do it for our large family of 6, soon to be 7, is that financially and the type of food that we want to eat, it would be very expensive to purchase everything locally like we prefer to do. We're not perfect, definitely not by any means, but it would be very, very, very expensive. So we grow it ourselves. Plus we like to garden. That's something that gives us enjoyment. So that isn't the case for everything. Like heading into our first category, which is something that I just refer to as like my baking, my bulk baking supplies. Bulk baking supplies tend to be things like all-purpose flour, bread flour, semolina flour, raisins, chocolate chips, yeast, molasses, sugar, things like that. That way, if I have all of those things plus vanilla, I can pretty much make anything I want, whether that be muffins or cookies, streusels, cakes, donuts, kind of whatever it is. I can make pretty much everything. I also consider little Jell-O packets and pudding packets into this category. I like to keep those on hand. My kids love them. Jell-O, all I need to mix up with the Jell-O packets is a little bit of water. Pudding, you just need a little bit of milk, and we can make our own little like snack cups for the kids. And even myself and my husband really like those as well after dinner for just like a little treat. It really just comes with trial and error, and depending on your family, how you like to cook and how you like to eat, how much of these things you need to store at a time. For me, I need to buy 50 pounds of flours and sugars at a time to hold for about 3 months worth of baking and cooking for my family's needs and family size. Rice, I go through about 25 pounds of rice every 3 months. But things like oats, we don't eat a lot of oats, we don't eat a lot of oatmeal. We pretty much only use them for baking, and I still buy those conventionally at an Aldi, where everything else that I mentioned I buy from like a bulk goods store Right now it's Sam's Club, but I'm looking into things like Azure Standard. Really just depends. Of course, there are other baking supplies like baking powders, baking sodas, cocoa powder. Those things I don't buy in bulk. The only exception to that is baking soda. I will buy in bulk, but that's because I use that to make a lot of my own homemade cleaners like toilet bombs, laundry detergents, like rust removal stuff to clean all of my appliances. So I go through a lot of baking soda, so it's not just for baking, but I will buy that. And that's my category that I try to make sure is stocked 100% of the time, because once I'm out of flour, I'm pretty much out of a lot of things, because we usually make our own pasta. We like to make a lot of our own breads, a lot of our own fun bakery treats. We don't buy from the store, things like muffins, cookies, streusels, cakes, all of those things we tend to make in-house. So once I'm out of those, we're out of all of those things, not just the flour. Into my second category, which I like to refer to as my starches. These are things like my rice, my pastas, potatoes. These can even be things like tortilla shells or taco shells. What I would reach for when cooking a meal for my family if I needed or wanted to add some starches in. Recently, this last year, we grew almost all of our own potatoes. We went about 9 months without growing potatoes or getting potatoes from the grocery store, which was pretty good for our first attempt. Usually we make our own pastas, but our chickens are not laying eggs right now, so we don't have eggs to make our own pasta, so we're buying pasta, and that's exactly why I like to have them stocked up on the pantry shelf for dry spells and chicken eggs like this, or even just for convenience on days when I don't feel like cooking, or maybe I'm out of the house and my husband's doing a meal with the kids. He can just grab a box pasta off the shelf, and we don't always have to worry about making it. Third category are canned veggies. This is something that personally my family, we don't really like. We do not prefer canned vegetables. We prefer ours frozen, whether that be store-bought vegetables or things that we grow in the garden. This is the first year I've learned how to pressure can, and we have experimented with a handful of vegetables and things, and we just prefer our things frozen or fresh. So we don't really go through a whole lot of canned items. However, since COVID, I have made it a priority to keep some of them on the shelf. I don't want to put all of my eggs in one basket. We also had a massive power outage that left my area without power for over a week. We were able to secure a generator, but as you can imagine, they were selling out fast. And if we wouldn't have had the generator on day like 3 or 4, once the temperature rose, because the power outage was caused by a massive snow and ice storm. So we were buried in snow for the first like 3 days, but then after that it got up to like 60, 70 degrees and all of the snow melted. So it wasn't cold to keep your freezer items cold anymore. That's when a lot of people lost food if they didn't have the generator. So I have learned from that experience, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket, especially when you are working as hard as we are to grow and preserve all of that food. It's time and money wasted. And it's honestly the same thing if you're buying your stuff from the grocery store. It's also time and money wasted when your freezers go out and all of your vegetables are gone. So I have pivoted to trying to put at least some of our stuff up on the pantry shelf. That way, in case a situation like that ever did come up again, we would have something at least. Something is better than nothing, and canned food items can last a very long time, so even if we go through them a little bit more slowly, I'm okay with that. Also, where we come into canned fruits, also not one of our favorite things. My kids will eat them upon occasion. I personally, and my husband personally, will never reach for a thing of canned fruit. We will never do it. It's just not something that we're going to reach for, but my kids will upon occasion. So I do like to keep some of those on the shelf for the kids, and we do eat those. The kids eat them somewhat regularly, but it's never going to be the first thing they're grabbing. I grocery shop once a month, and like right now, I think we have like 6 days to the end of the month. If I opened up my refrigerator right now and you looked in my crisper where we keep all of our fresh fruit, you would see I think we have like 8 oranges and 1 apple left. Once all of those are gone, the kids will gravitate towards what we have downstairs for canned fruit, canned peaches, canned pineapple, canned oranges, and whatever else we happen to have. The 6th category, and honestly, this might be my 2nd most important category, which sounds kind of crazy once I tell you what it is, and that's my convenience category. I found that during the power outage, my convenience items were the things that I reached for the most during that time. Things like canned soups, boxed dinners like hamburger helpers, really easy throw together meals were my go-to meals. It 100% was. Our oven stove did not work for the first handful of days. We were cooking everything off of a camp stove when my cast iron skillets. So I was making a lot of like one pot meals, things that I could just dump in, basically heat up on the camp stove, and we would have a warm meal to fill our bellies, especially when we were still buried in snow. Those were some of my most appreciated items. And they're also there not for just like not just for severe weather, even in other parts of the country that have had really bad severe weather, things like ice storms in the south, which are going on literally right now. Detroit is frozen over right now as I'm filming this. Plus we've had all of the hurricanes and the wildfires. Obviously wildfires are a completely different thing. That's just a whole different thing all in itself. But in situations like that, things that you can just reach for, pop open a can and heat it up, were things that were game changers for me, but also having convenience snacks for us. And what I store now has changed a little bit since then, because before, convenience snacks for us were things like popcorn and kind of like some things like that, maybe a handful of boxed items, but still things that like I needed a microwave for. And when the power went out, those convenience items weren't doable for us. So now I make sure I try to keep things like granola bars, small things of applesauce, maybe like some animal crackers, some Cheez-Its, goldfish, pretzels, nuts, things like that, that I can just open up, dump in a small bowl for the kids, and they can snack on kind of anytime, anywhere. And those are things that I prioritize keeping on the shelf, at least a handful of things at a time. It doesn't need to be crazy, but just a couple of those things. And I have really enjoyed keeping those on the shelf, even for times where sometimes I don't have our snack jars filled and I'm packing lunches for school. I can just grab some granola bars off of the shelf, a couple of those things that I mentioned, and throw them in lunch boxes really quick. And it kind of gives me a day or two in between having an empty snack jar and making sure that I can refill them with homemade things that we will put in kids' lunches. Is condiments, which is going to look different for everybody. I have some people in my life, if they were only stocking up on condiments, the only thing they would stock up on is ranch, or some people where the only thing they would stock up on is like barbecue sauce and ketchup. It really just depends on your family's wants and needs. It's just the only way that that's going to go. So things for us condiment wise, just to give you an idea, are things like spaghetti sauces or pizza sauces. We go through a whole lot of them because we make homemade pizzas and homemade strombolis all the time. But also things like mayo, which I usually make myself, but once again, chickens aren't laying eggs. I'm not making my own mayonnaise, so having some store-bought to back up is very nice. Things like ketchup, maple syrup, jelly and jams, which we do make ourselves, but kind of whatever you want. Also, we go through a lot of soy sauce because we use that a lot in marinades and different things. For sure, I'm missing a couple condiments that we like to keep on hand, but it's really anything that we use most often-ish. My last category is any sort of fat. These are things like peanut butter, olive oil, avocado oils, ghee, tallow, lard, coconut oils, things like that. I tend not to stock up a crazy amount on any fats because fats can go rancid. They do have a a shelf life. So I try not to keep too much of anything on my shelf at a time. And if I know I'm gonna go through a season where I'm gonna go through a lot more fats, like during the holidays, I will make sure I buy an extra. And it's not something that I try to make sure I have a crazy amount on my pantry shelf of a lot of different varieties, because if I'm out of like any sort of cooking oil, like my most used form of oil is olive oil. It's my go-to. Is what I use in my bread and pretty much all of my baking. But if I ever were out, I can always substitute with some tallow or some lard, and it'll be okay. I can melt down some coconut oil, that in between me running out and getting another shipment of a bulk oil, which I typically will also usually get from Sam's. How I've stocked up on these things over time is just buying an extra every once in a while. Sometimes when I know I'm lower in my grocery budget, I will go kind of like back through Aldi and get my canned goods because it's a good price there, and just buying a couple extra things at a time, and then you slowly build an overstock when you do things that way. But the quickest way and the cheapest way, in my opinion, to build some sort of food storage quickly is to grow your own food and learn how to preserve it. That can be a little bit of a process. I'm not gonna lie, it definitely can be, but I think in the long run, you're gonna be able to put up more food than you ever thought you ever would be able to for the littlest amount of money. Starting a food storage, I try to think about things in these categories. That way it kind of makes me feel a little bit less overwhelmed, because it can be an overwhelming thing to start a food storage. So when I break things down in these categories, I can go grocery shopping once a month and I can say, okay, this month I really want to focus on like my bulk baking goods, and I'm gonna spend my extra money in my bulk baking goods section and beefing that up a little bit. And then the next month I can go, okay, you know what, I'm looking at my pantry shelf and my canned fruits and my canned vegetables are kind of dwindling, so I know this month when I go to Aldi for grocery shopping, I'm gonna buy an extra flat of vegetables and an extra flat of fruits, and I'm gonna make sure that I'm getting those on the shelf. And it makes things a little less chaotic in my brain, but also thinking of things in meals. So that way, maybe one month I worked on my starches and I stocked up a lot on pastas. Then the next month when I go grocery shopping, I might make it a priority to work on my condiments and make sure that I'm stocking up on spaghetti sauces. That way it's a meal, right? Those are just some of my really simple, easy tricks to starting a food storage for any family size for any length of time that you're shooting for, without making it a process where you feel super overwhelmed or not really knowing where to start. I would sit down, kind of figure out what your categories are, and just slowly start stocking up one category at a time for what you feel is most important for your family at that season. Thank you guys for taking time out of your day, having a cup of coffee with me, a cup of tea, whatever you're drinking. I hope you're staying warm and staying safe wherever you are. Spring is on the horizon, and let's hope that with spring, all of the sicknesses go away. I've heard in the comments from you guys, a ton of you guys have been relentlessly sick this winter as well. It's not just my family and my area in particular. A lot of you guys are saying it's just as bad where you are. So hopefully spring is coming, the warmer weather is coming. We can get rid of all of the colds and the flus and just move on and move forward into some better horizons. I hope wherever you are, you're having a good day, and I will catch you guys in another video. Bye.